The microphone was already on when Nathaniel Brooks realized his daughter's dream was about to disappear. The auditorium lights washed over an empty stage, the kind of bright silence that makes 1,000 seats feel even bigger. 10-year-old Amelia stood behind the curtain, holding her music folder with both hands, trying not to cry. The final performance slot of the community school talent showcase was hers, the moment she had practiced for months, the song she had chosen because it was the same melody her mother used to hum around their kitchen. But her voice had failed that afternoon, and now the judges were waiting. The audience was waiting. Everyone was waiting for someone else to save the moment. Nathaniel stepped out from behind the curtain without announcing himself. He did not ask for attention. He did not explain. He simply walked toward his daughter, lowered himself to her eye level, and gently fixed the ribbon on her dress that had come loose. "Your dream does not disappear because tonight got difficult," he whispered. Amelia looked at him with tears gathering in her eyes. "But Dad, I can't sing." Nathaniel looked toward the empty microphone standing under the spotlight. For a second, something moved across his face, something deeper than fear. It was the expression of a man looking at a door he had kept locked for years. The host approached carefully and checked the schedule. "Mr. Brooks, we need a decision. The audience is getting restless." Nathaniel nodded. He understood. A single father who worked behind the scenes fixing speakers and cables was not the person anyone expected to see on stage. The other performers had coaches, expensive lessons, and polished introductions. Nathaniel had grease stains on his work jacket from repairing equipment earlier that day. He had spent years making sure other people sounded better while keeping his own voice quiet. The host handed him the microphone. "Are you performing?" Nathaniel did not answer immediately. His thumb brushed against the worn metal surface of the microphone, and for a brief moment, he looked at the small scratch near the bottom. A tiny mark almost nobody would notice. But he noticed. He had placed that mark there 12 years earlier, back when music was still a part of his life. Back when people knew his name for a completely different reason. The audience murmured as Nathaniel walked onto the stage. Some parents glanced at each other, wondering who this man was. A few assumed he was only trying to comfort his daughter. Nobody knew what he had buried beneath ordinary clothes and a quiet routine. Nobody knew why a simple school microphone could make his hands hesitate. Amelia watched from the side of the stage, confused but hopeful. She had spent her whole life seeing her father fix broken things, cook dinner after long shifts, and stay awake when she had nightmares. But she had never seen him do this. Nathaniel took one slow breath. The room grew quieter. Then he closed his eyes, not like a performer preparing for applause, but like a father remembering a promise he had made long ago. The first note left his mouth, and the conversation stopped instantly. The judges froze with their pens above the paper. The music teacher in the front row slowly stood up, and an elderly woman sitting near the back dropped her program onto the floor because she recognized that voice. She had not heard it in 12 years. She whispered his name, but Nathaniel never heard her. He was too focused on the little girl watching him from the side of the stage, unaware that the song she thought was only for her was about to reveal a part of her father that had been hidden from the world for more than a decade. The first note had lasted only a few seconds, but Nathaniel Brooks felt as if 12 years had collapsed into that single moment. He opened his eyes and saw the room differently. The faces looking back at him were no longer strangers. They were witnesses, but the only face he searched for was Amelia's. His daughter stood near the curtain, frozen between confusion and pride, holding the music folder against her chest like it was the only thing keeping her steady. Nathaniel gave her a small smile, the same quiet smile he used every morning when he packed her lunch before school. To him, this was not a performance. It was a promise that she would never have to face disappointment alone. Yet something had changed inside the room. The judges who had been preparing to move on were no longer looking at the schedule. They were looking at him. Jordan Ellis, the youngest judge on the panel, slowly lowered his pen. He had heard thousands of voices during local competitions, from children with expensive training to adults chasing second chances. But this was different. There was something behind Nathaniel's voice that did not come from practice alone. It sounded like someone who had lost something and carried it quietly. When the song ended, nobody reacted immediately. The silence was almost heavier than applause. Nathaniel lowered the microphone and stepped back, ready to return to his place beside his daughter. He did not expect recognition. He did not expect anyone to care. That was why the next sound surprised him. An elderly woman near the back of the auditorium stood slowly from her seat. Her hands trembled as she held the edge of the chair. "Where did you learn that song?" she asked. Nathaniel looked toward her, but said nothing. He knew the question was not really about the song. It was about something she thought she recognized. Amelia looked between them, noticing the change in her father's expression. She had never seen him look uncertain before. The woman walked closer, studying him carefully. "You are Nathaniel Brooks, aren't you?" The room shifted again. How could a retired music teacher from a small Virginia town know a man who spent his days repairing speakers in school hallways? Nathaniel looked down for a moment before answering. "I used to be." Those 4 words created another wave of questions. Used to be what? Why did he speak like that part of his life belonged to someone else? Why had he hidden something so extraordinary from the daughter who admired him more than anyone? After the event ended, parents surrounded the stage, asking about his voice and where they could hear him perform again. Nathaniel thanked them politely, but his attention stayed on Amelia. She was quiet as they packed up her music folder. Finally, she looked at him and asked the question he had been hoping would not come that night. "Dad, why did you never tell me you could sing like that?" Nathaniel placed the folder into her backpack carefully, making sure the corners were not bent. It was the same small habit he had followed since she started kindergarten. "Because some dreams change," he said. But Amelia noticed something inside the pocket of his old jacket when he reached for the zipper. A faded photograph slipped out and landed on the floor. She picked it up before he could. It showed a much younger Nathaniel standing beneath bright stage lights, holding a microphone, surrounded by people cheering his name. On the back of the photograph were 3 handwritten words that made Amelia look at her father differently. "The voice returns." Nathaniel took the picture from her hand, but it was too late. His daughter had seen the part of him he had spent years protecting her from. And what neither of them knew was that someone else at the auditorium had taken a picture of that moment. And by the next morning, Nathaniel's hidden past would begin spreading far beyond their small town. The photograph was still in Amelia's hands when Nathaniel realized the past he had tried to keep quiet was no longer waiting patiently behind him. Before he could explain, his phone began vibrating on the table. It was the school's music coordinator, calling about the performance footage from the previous night. Nathaniel looked at the screen for several seconds before answering. "Mr. Brooks, I know this is sudden, but the recording committee wants to discuss something with you," the coordinator said. "Your performance has been shared with the regional arts program, and they want you to audition." Nathaniel looked across the kitchen at Amelia, who was still holding the old photograph. A year ago, that call would have been everything he dreamed about. Now it felt like a question he was not prepared to answer. "I appreciate the opportunity," he said carefully, "but I am not sure I can do that." Amelia immediately noticed his hesitation. She had spent years watching her father fix broken appliances, repair school equipment, and quietly solve problems nobody else wanted to handle. She knew the difference between him being unable and him choosing not to. But before she could ask why, Nathaniel made a decision that would cost him something. He asked the coordinator if the audition slot could be given to another student instead. "There are children who have been waiting for this chance longer than I have," he said. "My daughter deserves to see them have their moment too." On the other end of the phone, there was silence. The coordinator did not understand why someone who had just surprised an entire auditorium would step away from an opportunity. Neither did Amelia. The next morning, Nathaniel returned to his regular job at Richmond Community Arts School, wearing the same work jacket and carrying the same toolbox he always carried. But something was different. People were looking at him. Students whispered when he walked through the hallway. Teachers who had passed him for years suddenly stopped to say hello. The man who had repaired microphones in the background had become the person everyone wanted to know. But Nathaniel did not act differently. When a young student struggled with a broken keyboard before rehearsal, he sat beside her, opened his toolbox, and repaired it without mentioning the attention he had received. That small moment was noticed by Clara Whitmore, the retired music teacher who had recognized him the night before. She watched from the doorway as Nathaniel handed the keyboard back and told the student, "Everyone deserves the chance to be heard." Clara saw something that confused her. The young singer she remembered from 12 years earlier had possessed incredible talent, but the man standing in front of her now carried something even rarer: patience, humility, responsibility. Yet Clara also knew there was a reason Nathaniel disappeared. She remembered the headlines from years ago, the sudden cancellation of a major performance, and the rumors that followed. Why would someone with a voice like his walk away from everything? Later that afternoon, Nathaniel received an unexpected visit from Jordan Ellis, one of the judges from the showcase. Jordan arrived carrying a folder filled with notes. "I wanted to thank you," Jordan said, "but I also wanted to ask you something." Nathaniel looked up from repairing a speaker. "What question?" Jordan opened the folder and placed an old concert flyer on the table. The image was faded, but the name printed across the top was clear. Nathaniel Brooks. Jordan pointed to a line beneath it. "Why does this say you were supposed to perform at the biggest music festival in Virginia 12 years ago, and then your name disappeared overnight?" Nathaniel's hand stopped moving. He looked at the flyer, then at Amelia's backpack sitting near the door. For years, he had protected his daughter from the disappointment of losing his dream. But now someone was asking about the part of his life he never wanted her to know. Then Jordan placed one more item on the table. A sealed envelope. "This was sent to the school this morning," Jordan said quietly. "It has your name on it." Nathaniel stared at the envelope, recognizing the handwriting before he even touched it. The person who wrote it was someone he thought he would never hear from again. Nathaniel Brooks stared at the sealed envelope on the workbench for almost a full minute before touching it. The room around him was familiar, filled with cables, old speakers, and unfinished repairs, but suddenly every ordinary object felt connected to a life he had tried to leave behind. Clara Whitmore watched quietly from the doorway. She knew that whatever was inside that envelope mattered because Nathaniel, the man who always moved with calm certainty, was now standing completely still. Finally, he opened it. Inside was a letter from the director of the Virginia Harmony Festival, the same festival where Nathaniel had been scheduled to perform 12 years earlier. The invitation was simple. They wanted him back. But beneath the invitation was a sentence that changed the meaning of everything. They were not asking because they discovered a new talent. They were asking because someone had found an old recording of him. A recording Nathaniel believed no longer existed. Jordan Ellis leaned closer. "Why did you disappear after this?" he asked. Nathaniel folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. "Because life changed," he answered. It was a simple explanation, but everyone in the room could feel there was a story hidden behind those words. Before anyone could ask more, Nathaniel's phone rang again. This time it was not an opportunity. It was the school principal. Amelia had been removed from the student showcase announcement because the committee was reconsidering her performance slot. The reason was not her talent. It was because people were questioning whether her father's unexpected appearance had taken attention away from the students. Nathaniel listened without interrupting. He could have defended himself. He could have explained his history. He could have shown them the old articles and recordings. Instead, he asked one question. "Will Amelia still have a chance to perform?" The principal hesitated. "That depends on whether the committee believes the event should become about her or about you." The words stayed with Nathaniel long after the call ended. For years, he had avoided the spotlight because he never wanted his daughter to feel like she lived in the shadow of his past. Now his silence was creating a different problem. People were making decisions about Amelia because they misunderstood him. That evening, Nathaniel sat with Amelia at the kitchen table. Her music folder was open between them, but neither of them looked at the pages. "Did you really give up singing because of me?" she asked. Nathaniel looked surprised. "No." He reached across the table and adjusted the corner of her folder, a small habit she had seen thousands of times. "I changed because you gave me something more important to protect." Amelia looked down, but her question revealed something deeper. She did not want a famous father. She wanted to know who her father really was. The next morning, Nathaniel returned to the school auditorium to help prepare for the next event. But something unexpected was waiting for him. A group of parents had gathered outside, and several were holding printed copies of an old article about his disappearance from the music world. Someone had shared the story online overnight. Some people were impressed. Others were suspicious. They wondered why he hid his past. They wondered what else he had not told them. Then Clara walked toward Nathaniel holding a second envelope. Her expression had changed. This was not curiosity anymore. It was concern. "Nathaniel," she said quietly. "This came from someone who was there the night everything ended." Nathaniel looked at the name written on the front. His face lost its calm for the first time. Because the sender was the person who knew why he walked away from music forever. The name written on the envelope changed everything because Nathaniel Brooks knew exactly who had sent it. He did not open it immediately. He carried it home instead, placing it carefully beside the old photograph Amelia had found. as if both objects belonged to a part of his life that had been waiting years to be understood. That night, after Amelia went to sleep, Nathaniel sat alone at the kitchen table. The house was quiet except for the soft sound of the refrigerator and the ticking clock above the doorway. He held the envelope in his hands, but he was not afraid of what was inside. He was afraid of what it would force him to remember. When he finally opened it, the first thing he saw was not a letter. It was a small memory card attached to a note. The handwriting belonged to David Calloway, the producer who had discovered Nathaniel when he was 27 years old. The note contained only one sentence. "You deserve to know what really happened that night." Nathaniel inserted the memory card into his old laptop, the same laptop he used for school repair schedules and work invoices. A video appeared. The quality was poor, the colors faded, but the sound was clear. A younger Nathaniel stood under stage lights, singing to a crowd that knew his name. Amelia watched from the hallway when she woke up and noticed the screen. She did not interrupt. She simply listened. For the first time, she saw her father not as the man who packed her lunches or fixed broken speakers, but as someone who once had a completely different world. When the video ended, Amelia asked softly, "Why did you let everyone forget you?" Nathaniel looked at the screen for a long moment. "I did not want to be remembered for something I could not give anymore." But that answer created another question. What exactly had he lost? The next day, Clara Whitmore arrived at the school carrying an old newspaper clipping. She placed it beside Nathaniel's toolbox. The article was from 12 years earlier. The headline suggested Nathaniel had abandoned a major music opportunity at the final moment. But Clara pointed to a small detail most people would never notice. The date on the article was wrong. "Someone changed the story," she said. Nathaniel looked closer. The official explanation had always been that he simply walked away. But the documents showed something different. A scheduled performance had been canceled before he ever made that decision. Someone had removed him from the event. The discovery changed the way everyone saw him. He was not a man who failed and disappeared. He was a man who disappeared after something happened that he never explained. But why had he stayed silent? Before Nathaniel could answer, Jordan Ellis arrived with another piece of information. The regional arts program had reviewed the video from the showcase, and they wanted Nathaniel to appear at a special event. However, there was a condition. They wanted him to explain the reason he left music behind. They wanted the story behind the voice. Nathaniel refused immediately, not because he was ashamed, because he knew the truth involved someone else, someone who had once helped him and later became connected to the reason he walked away. That evening, Amelia found another item hidden inside the old music case. It was a letter her father had kept but never sent. The envelope was addressed to a woman named Evelyn Calloway. Amelia looked at the name and realized something. The person her father had protected all these years was not just a memory. She was someone who was still alive. And when Nathaniel saw the letter in his daughter's hands, he knew the secret he had buried was about to come back into both of their lives. Nathaniel Brooks had spent 12 years protecting a story that was not his alone to tell. But now the truth was moving faster than he could control. The following morning, the auditorium at Richmond Community Arts School was filled with teachers, students, and parents waiting for the special announcement about the regional music event. Nathaniel stood near the back wall with his toolbox in his hand, the same place he had always stood when other people took the stage. But this time, people were looking at him differently. The old assumptions had started to disappear. The man they once knew as the quiet repair worker was now connected to a voice that had once filled concert halls. Still, Nathaniel refused to walk forward until he knew why he had been pushed away from music years earlier. Jordan Ellis arrived carrying a tablet. Without saying anything, he placed it on a table and pressed play. It was not another performance video. It was a recording from behind the scenes at the Virginia Harmony Festival 12 years earlier. The room was small, crowded with producers and staff members. A younger Nathaniel stood near the stage entrance, holding his microphone and waiting for his turn. Then something unexpected happened. A producer received a phone call and announced that Nathaniel's performance had been removed from the official program. Everyone in the room looked confused, including Nathaniel. He had not walked away. He had been taken away. Amelia watched the recording beside her father, and her expression changed. She had spent years believing her father simply abandoned his dream. Now she saw the truth was more complicated. Clara Whitmore stepped closer to the screen and pointed at one person standing in the background. That man was David Calloway's assistant, she said. He controlled the final schedule that night. The discovery answered one question, but created another. Why would someone remove Nathaniel from the biggest opportunity of his life? Jordan continued the video. A younger Nathaniel was shown leaving the building with his phone in his hand. He looked disappointed, but he was not broken. Then the recording stopped. A missing section had been removed. Someone had intentionally cut out the most important moment. Nathaniel looked at the blank screen and quietly said, "That is the part nobody was supposed to see." Everyone turned toward him. For the first time, Nathaniel was not hiding. He opened the old music case he had carried for years and removed a small notebook. Inside were handwritten songs, unfinished melodies, and notes from his late wife. Amelia touched the pages carefully. She recognized her mother's handwriting immediately. "Mom knew about this?" she asked. Nathaniel nodded. "She was the reason I kept writing." The room became silent. The hidden talent was not the only secret. The music itself had been connected to his family all along. But before Nathaniel could explain more, a message appeared on Jordan's phone. The Regional Arts Committee had made a decision. They wanted Nathaniel to perform at the upcoming festival. But there was a problem. The original organizer of the event was also attending. David Calloway was not just a former producer. He was the person who could finally explain what happened 12 years ago. Nathaniel stared at the message, knowing the chance he had avoided for years was now standing in front of him. Amelia reached for his hand. "Dad, are you going?" Nathaniel looked at the stage where she had once dreamed of singing. Then he looked at the old notebook filled with memories he had never shared. For years, he believed silence was how he protected his daughter. But now he had to choose between keeping the past buried or stepping forward and revealing everything. Then his phone rang. The caller name appeared on the screen, and Nathaniel's face changed. It was David Calloway. The phone rang 3 times before Nathaniel Brooks finally answered. Everyone around him could hear the hesitation in the silence before he spoke. "Hello, David." The name alone carried 12 years of unanswered questions. Nathaniel stepped away from the others, but Amelia could still see the change in his face. This was not the calm expression of the father who always knew what to do. This was the expression of someone standing at the edge of a memory he had spent years avoiding. David Calloway did not begin with an apology. He began with a truth. "Nathaniel, I should have told people what happened that night." Nathaniel looked toward the stage, where his daughter's name was written on the event board. "Why did you wait?" he asked. The question was simple, but everyone understood the weight behind it. David explained that after Nathaniel's performance was removed, he discovered the decision had been made by someone above him. A sponsor had demanded changes to the festival lineup, and Nathaniel was quietly replaced. David wanted to fight it, but he chose to protect his position instead. He stayed silent. Nathaniel listened without anger. Somehow, that made the conversation harder. Because David expected blame. What he received was disappointment. "You had a choice," Nathaniel said. "And you made one." Those words stayed with David long after the call ended. But the consequences were already spreading. The Regional Arts Committee reviewed the old records, the missing footage, and the original performance schedule. The truth was no longer hidden inside forgotten files. It was becoming public. Parents who had questioned Nathaniel began seeing him differently. The same people who wondered why he hid his past now wondered why nobody had protected him when he needed it. But Nathaniel still refused to use the situation for personal gain. When the committee offered him a featured performance slot and a special award, he asked one question. "Will Amelia still get to sing?" The committee members exchanged surprised looks. They expected him to ask for recognition. They did not expect him to ask for his daughter's chance first. Clara Whitmore watched from the side of the room and smiled quietly. She had spent decades teaching students about music, but Nathaniel reminded her of something she had almost forgotten. The greatest voices were not always the loudest ones. Meanwhile, Jordan Ellis faced his own realization. He had judged Nathaniel based on what he saw on stage. Now he understood the real story was everything that happened before the spotlight ever reached him. He apologized to Nathaniel for assuming the performance was only a hidden talent reveal. "I thought I was discovering your voice," Jordan admitted. "But I was actually discovering your courage." That evening, Nathaniel returned home and found Amelia sitting with the old notebook. She had carefully arranged the pages in order, reading every song her father had written. "Why did you never finish these?" she asked. Nathaniel sat beside her. "Because I thought those songs belonged to a life that was over." Amelia looked at him and answered with the honesty only a child could offer. "Maybe they were waiting for you." For the first time in years, Nathaniel allowed himself to believe that his past was not something he had to hide. But the next morning, a new message arrived from the festival committee. The final performance schedule had been released. Nathaniel's name was included. Amelia's name was not. Someone had made a last-minute decision that changed everything. Nathaniel stared at the screen, knowing the truth had finally been revealed, but the moment his daughter deserved was still at risk. Then another message appeared beneath it. It was from David Calloway. Before you decide what to do, you need to see what happened after you left that stage 12 years ago. The message from David Calloway arrived before sunrise, and Nathaniel Brooks opened it while the rest of the house was still quiet. Inside was a video file recorded 12 years earlier, but this time it was not a performance. It showed the moments after Nathaniel had left the festival stage. The younger version of himself sat alone in an empty hallway, holding the same microphone he had carried for years. Then David appeared on the screen. He placed a contract on the table and explained that Nathaniel had been offered a new opportunity, but there was a condition. The sponsors wanted him to change the kind of music he performed, change the story behind his songs, and become someone easier to market. Nathaniel had refused. Not because he lacked ambition, but because he knew the songs he wrote came from real experiences, from his family, and from the people who trusted him. The final recording showed Nathaniel walking away from the contract and choosing his own values over a faster path to success. Amelia watched the video beside him, and she finally understood something her father had never said aloud. He did not lose his dream. He protected it. But before the emotional moment could settle, another problem appeared. The festival organizers still had not restored Amelia's performance slot. The committee members believed the event had already changed too much because of Nathaniel's unexpected return. Nathaniel looked at the schedule in silence. He could have demanded his own place. He could have used the proof of his past to force them to listen. Instead, he walked into the committee meeting and placed the old recording on the table. "I am not here to take a place from another artist," he said. "I am here because my daughter deserves the chance she earned." The room became quiet. The committee expected a request for recognition. They did not expect a father to use his own moment to protect someone else's. Jordan Ellis spoke next. He explained that the original showcase had always been about discovering voices that deserved to be heard. If we remove Amelia because her father is talented, then we are forgetting the reason this event exists. Those words changed the conversation. The same people who once worried about Nathaniel becoming the center of attention now realized he had spent the entire time trying to keep attention away from himself. Later that day, the final schedule was changed. Amelia's name returned to the program. Nathaniel was offered a separate performance after the student showcase, but he made one request. He wanted Amelia beside him for the final song. When the night arrived, the auditorium looked different from the first time Nathaniel stepped onto that stage. He was no longer an unknown man holding a microphone. He was a father standing beside the person who inspired him to find his voice again. Amelia began the song with confidence, her voice carrying through the room. Then Nathaniel joined her. The audience did not see a forgotten singer returning. They saw a father and daughter sharing something that had survived years of silence. Clara Whitmore wiped away a tear as she watched. David Calloway stood near the back, not seeking forgiveness, only witnessing the result of the choice Nathaniel had made years ago. When the final note ended, the applause continued longer than anyone expected. Nathaniel looked at Amelia and smiled. For the first time, he was not thinking about what he had lost. But after the celebration ended, Clara approached him with a small box she had carried all evening. "There is one more thing you should have," she said. Nathaniel opened the box and saw something that made him stop breathing for a moment. It was an unfinished song written 12 years ago, but the final page contained a note from someone who had been waiting all this time for him to finish it. Nathaniel Brooks held the unfinished song in his hands for several minutes before he played the first note written on the final page. The handwriting was familiar, but seeing it again after so many years felt different. It was not just a song. It was a message from the life he thought he had left behind. The final page contained a note from his late wife, written shortly before she passed away. It said that the greatest songs were not the ones performed in front of thousands of people, but the ones that reminded someone they were loved. Nathaniel sat quietly at the kitchen table while Amelia read the words beside him. For years, he believed he had buried his dream to protect his daughter from disappointment. Now he understood that his daughter had been the reason his dream survived. A few weeks later, Nathaniel and Amelia returned to the same auditorium where everything had changed. The stage lights were brighter, the seats were fuller, and the microphone that once represented a past he avoided now represented a future he accepted. But Nathaniel did not walk onto the stage alone. Amelia held his hand as they stepped forward together. The audience saw the same man who had once stood quietly behind the curtains fixing equipment. They saw the father who always arrived early, stayed late, and made sure everyone else had what they needed. But now they also saw the person hidden behind that quiet life. Before they performed, Nathaniel made a choice that surprised everyone. He invited several young students from the community arts program onto the stage. Children who had never performed outside their classrooms. Children who believed their voices were too small to matter. He gave them the same microphone he once held alone. Jordan Ellis watched from the front row and realized that Nathaniel's greatest gift was never only his voice. It was the way he used it to make others believe they had one too. After the performance, the regional arts program offered Nathaniel a professional opportunity. This time, he did not walk away, but he also did not chase fame. He accepted on one condition. He wanted the program to create free music workshops for children who could not afford lessons. The man who once disappeared from the spotlight now used that spotlight to create space for others. Clara Whitmore kept the old photograph from 12 years earlier and placed it inside the school's music hall. But beneath the picture, she added a new message. It was not about a famous singer returning. It was about a father who chose love before recognition. Years passed, and Amelia grew into a confident young musician. She kept her father's old microphone on a shelf in her room, not because it was valuable, but because it reminded her of the night she discovered that ordinary people could carry extraordinary stories. Nathaniel still repaired school equipment. He still packed lunches. He still woke up early and checked that his daughter had everything she needed before thinking about himself. Some things never changed. One evening, years after that first performance, Amelia found her father sitting outside their home, listening to an old recording of the two of them singing together. She sat beside him and asked if he ever wished he had returned to music sooner. Nathaniel smiled and looked at the recording, then at the daughter who had unknowingly brought his voice back. "No," he said. "I was exactly where I needed to be." The microphone, the forgotten songs, the old photograph, and the unfinished melody had all carried the same truth. His greatest performance was never the moment the world finally heard him. It was every quiet moment when he chose to be there for the person who needed him most. Thank you for watching until the end of the video.